Hope all of us are doing great. I'm Ernest, and I'd like to welcome each and every one of us to my channel of Ernest Sciences and Mathematics TV channel. First, before we proceed, kindly allow me to appreciate our incoming members. I'd like to welcome all of us and request us to kindly, of course, engage to other members out there and welcome them to the group so that we can form a large community of members discussing different topics in mathematics and sciences. Now, in today's discussion, I'm going to look at specific examples of elements which are going to be involved in biological, of course, systems. And this is going to be constituting basically their roles in biological systems. And therefore, we shall look at roles of basically chemical elements, of course, in biological systems. And this is going to be assisting us appreciate further from our previous discussion, whereby we looked at a range of bioinorganic molecules and their specific roles in biological systems. Now, in a sense, we shall look at a few examples of some of the specific roles which we are going to come across. And in our subsequent video, which is going to be basically a continuation of this, we shall look at individual elements and their various contributions in details, which is going to be cementing on this specific topic of today. So therefore, we shall look at these specific roles in terms of a set of 5 sections, whereby we shall look at a structural function, which is going to assist us appreciate the structural functions of these specific elements in biological system. And then we shall look at these specific elements as charge carriers. Now, this is going to be entailing of course, the transfer of positive and negative charges, particularly positive charges, which we're going to be looking across various aspects of particularly the concept of cell physiology. And also we shall look at the concept of formation of or conversion of molecules, and in this case we shall look at basically small molecules which we're going to see are being converted into other forms using this specific of course aspect of elements. So we shall have this one particularly as a conversion of small molecules. So we shall be giving some of the examples which we are going to come across in our subsequent discussion. So therefore, I'm just going to be giving them in this specific summary form. And of course, we shall come across this process of catalysis, which we said, of course, is going to be involving this particular, of course, aspect of enzymes and catalysts. And therefore, these specific elements are going to be playing a vital role of a catalyst in trying to ensure that some of the protein molecules and enzymes are going to be, of course, performing their roles effectively. Now, we shall also look at the concept of electron transfer or transfer of what we refer to as electrons. And this basically is going to be involving some aspect of energy conversions, which we're going to be witnessing in some of the processes like perhaps, of course, photosynthesis and the respiration that we're going to talk about in our, of course, detailed form. Now, we shall as well look at one of the roles of these specific, of course, elements in terms of perhaps the transfer of information. And this also is going to be entailing this specific aspect of charge. So therefore, we shall just have to look at these particular functions which I've listed on the board, which constitute the structural functions which is going to be carried out by elements, and of course, charge carriers, conversion of small molecules, the concepts of catalysis and transfer of electrons, which we're going to be looking at using specific examples. Now, in this particular case, we're going to have this particular function which is going to be given as a structural. But again, we're going to see that apart from these specific elements providing an aspect of structural integrity, we're also going to see that we're going to have a part of the functions which are going to be, of course, undertaken by these particular molecules or other elements. And therefore, this specific statement is going to be catering for those specific two aspects of structural and functional integrity of various aspects of the biological systems which we're going to come across. So we shall look at the first function, which is going to be basically the structural and functional integrity of these biological systems. And therefore, we shall have this one perhaps trying to look at specific examples which we have come across. Now, in our study of the concept of cell physiology, we talked about, so this is going to be the concept of cell physiology. We talked about the various ways in which the cell membrane is going to be, of course, maintained. And in this case, we said that there's going to be a cross-link, of course, which is going to be witnessed between the metal ions, and of course this is going to be providing for the stability of what we refer to as organic materials, and this is going to lead to the maintaining of what we refer to as the cell membrane. So basically, the cross-link, of course, which is going to be provided by the presence of metal ions in the, of course, what we refer to as organic molecules. And these specific organic molecules are going to be forming the structural part of this specific cell membrane. Now, this is going to be achieved through the presence of metal ions, which are going to be providing for this specific aspect of what I have referred to as cross links. And these specific links are going to be creating the structural integrity of these particular molecules, which are going to be, of course, found in what we refer to as the cell membrane. So this is going to be playing a structural function, as we are going to be seeing in this specific case, and we shall give specific examples as we are going to come by in our various, of course, other videos which we're going to be mentioning. And of course, we have said about the concept of this specific protein structure. And therefore, for structural functions, these specific elements are going to be providing for, or the metal ions are going to be stabilizing and maintaining the protein structure, which is going to be, of course, dictating the function of some proteins. For example, the deoxyribonucleic acid, which is going to be DNA. So we are going to consider this specific aspect of a structural, of course, function being, of course, achieved at the cellular level for these ones, and the molecules like proteins, which are going to be, of course, being provided stability through the presence of metal ions in this particular case. So these are some of the functions which we can just give for the two cases, in particular for the structural function of these specific elements in the, of course, biological systems. And particularly, as I have mentioned, the concept of metal ions being involved in the first and the second case, and therefore we can give an example of ions which are going to be involved in this structural function of particularly the cell and the DNA, which I have mentioned, which basically can be given as these specific elements of zinc, calcium, and of course magnesium given as such. So in case we come across these specific elements, then this one of the functions which we're going to be witnessing as we go by in our subsequent discussion. So we shall look at the second function, which we said is going to be charge carriers, and try to see how these specific elements are going to be playing a role in trying to play a role as charge carriers in the biological system. So we shall have this one given as, so this is going to be function number 2. The first one is a structural function, the second one is a charge carriers, and therefore we're going to see a range of elements which are going to be involved in this particular case. Now, the main function of carrying charges across the, perhaps the membrane is going to be providing for information transfer. And the information within the body, of course, is transferred through the membrane in forms of what we refer to as electrical impulses. Now, in this case, I've mentioned these specific terms in our study on the concept of the, of course, the nervous system. And we're going to see that this is going to be providing for information transfer within different sections of the body, which is going to be facilitated by the, of course, presence of what we refer to as ion channels. So these ion channels are referred to as ionophores. So in this case, we are going to see that these are going to be involved in the transfer of charges. And this also is going to be involving what we refer to as the membrane, or what we refer to as the membrane ion pump. Membrane ion pump. So I'd like to refer our members to kindly go and check also the concept of the cell physiology, which we have discussed, especially on the concept of the cell membrane, and some of the discussions which we have had, especially on the concept of the nervous system, which is going to assist us try to, of course, appreciate the two particular functions which I have mentioned. Now, in the lower section, we can give an example of this one given as this specific pump, which we can give in terms of sodium-potassium ATPase, a pump which we are going to come across. And of course, we said that this is specific functions of such a kind of pumps are going to be specifically in trying to control the concentration of elements within the cell. And of course, specific ions are going to be responsible in trying to facilitate this specific aspect of charge carrying, which potentially is going to be leading to information transfer. Now, we can give examples of ions which are going to be involved in this particular case. Now, I've mentioned particularly of the example of this specific pump which I've given in terms of sodium-potassium ATPase pump, and I can give some of the additional, of course, ions which are going to be involved in this particular case, including the two which I've mentioned for sodium and potassium. So we shall have calcium as well being involved, and hydrogen ions given as such. And therefore, these are some of the, of course, elements in ion form which we're going to encounter being involved in the concept of charge transfer. Now we shall look at a third function which we said, apart from them being structural function, charge carriers, we shall look at the third function which we said is going to be transfer of electron for energy conversion. And this is going to be occurring in the body of organisms. So therefore, we shall look at the function number 3, which basically is a transfer of electrons for energy conversion. And I've just given this one of the examples of the process of photosynthesis and of course cellular respiration, which are going to be depending on the transfer of these specific electrons. Now therefore, we are going to see that this is going to be mainly depending on the what we refer to as a set of metals which are redox-active metals. And in this case, we shall look at particularly two examples of metals which are going to be redox-active metals. These are going to be facilitating the transfer of electrons and, of course, the concept of energy conversion. And one of the examples of these types of ions which we're going to come across is going to be ion given as such. So this is going to be ion 2 or ion 3 for these oxidation states, and perhaps we shall give this one in terms of this specific set which is going to be given as such. And as well, we shall look at an ion of copper, so oxidation number 1, and copper 2 given as such. So we shall speak about these ones especially in details when we're going to come across these two specific processes which I've mentioned for cellular respiration. So this is going to be cellular respiration and the process of photosynthesis, which we're going to be discussing about in details in our subsequent videos. So this is going to be playing a role of this specific function of transfer of electrons for energy conversion. And as we said, of course, the process of respiration is going to be one of the ways in which these specific biological systems, especially for the as a concept of cellular respiration, is going to be producing some of the aspect of this energy. So therefore, it's going to be important for these specific ions to be present to ensure that these particular processes are taking place. And that is going to be one of the roles of these chemical elements in biological systems. Now we shall look at this specific function of a conversion of small molecules, which is going to assist us in trying to, of course, understand how this metal in terms of ion forms are going to be involved, or these elements in terms of ion forms are going to be involved in what we call conversion of small molecules. Conversion of small molecules. Now there are some cases whereby we're going to see that some of the chemical reactions which are going to take place are going to be requiring conditions which are not going to be provided for within these biological systems, and therefore the presence of these specific elements is going to be providing for what we refer to as the condition of catalytic conditions, which are going to be assisting these specific physiological processes to be taking place. Now this is due to the ability of these specific elements to form what we refer to as coordinate compounds. And we shall come across these specific compounds in a study of various ranges of coordinate chemistry, which we are going to be finding some of the complexes being given in terms of course, structures containing these specific, what we refer to as metal ions in particular. And therefore, this is going to be assisting us try to appreciate the role of these specific metals in trying to convert small molecules into complex compounds, which can be, of course, playing a vital role in our biological systems. So therefore, this basically is going to be assisting organisms to carry out energetically difficult reactions under the physiological conditions which are basically within the bodies of particular organisms. Now, in a sense, we are going to see that one of the examples which we can give in terms of this specific course, processes which are going to involve the utilization of metals in performing these specific reactions. It's the process of nitrogen fixation. So this is going to be nitrogen fixation, which occurs in nodules of leguminous plants, and this is going to be a specific example which I'm just going to mention. So this is going to be requiring what we refer to as catalysts, which are going to be facilitating the, of course, these specific reactions to occur under those physiological conditions. Now, in a sense, we're going to see that some of the roles of elements which are going to be, of course, performed is going to be done using the metal ions of or the metals of iron, molybdenum, and vanadium. And of course, we are going to come across various other examples which we can use in terms of our illustration. Now, in our second video, we're going to look at individual functions of these specific different kind of metals which have, or rather, different kinds of elements which I've mentioned. And this is going to be assisting us appreciate the overall role of these specific elements, as I've said. So particularly, as I've mentioned, we said that we're going to looking essentially at these specific roles which I've said. And our last one is going to be, of course, the role number 5, which we said is going to be for catalytic or catalysis in the formation, metabolism, and of course, the degradation of organic compounds. And of course, I think this one we just, we never mentioned this one, but we're going to just also to look at it as our last set of functions. And this is going to be in catalysis, in formation. So they are going to be involved in the process of catalysis during formation, metabolism, and the degradation of organic compounds. So this is going to be degradation of so overall, this is going to be this specific chemical elements are going to be involved in catalysis, which is going to be involved in formation, metabolism, and degradation of organic compounds given as such. So we're going to be giving specific examples for this specific function, whereby we're going to see that many of these reactions which are going to be involving enzymes are going to be requiring metal ions for them to function optimally. And we're going to see that enzymes are going to require metal ions for their functions, which is going to be specifically, of course, involving catalyzed reactions. So one of the examples of formation of compounds of this specific isomerism, which is going to be occurring in carbon. So it's going to be involving a specific enzyme which we are going to give as isomerase. So in this specific case, therefore, this particular enzyme is going to be relying on some of the metals which are going to be, or metallic chemical elements which are going to be involved in trying to facilitate the proper functioning of this specific enzyme for the process to take place. And of course, this is one of the examples of enzymes which we can give. So we can give a second one which also is going to be involved in processes which are, of course, redox reactions. And I've mentioned the concept of metals which are redox reactive. So we shall look at examples of course, enzymes which are going to be involved in this particular case. And this include the oxidases and the reductases, which basically are enzymes also which are going to be relying on these chemical elements in order for them to perform their functions optimally. So in this case, we can just give a few examples of these specific ions which are going to be involved, and this include magnesium, of course, zinc, and calcium, which we can just give but a few examples of these specific elements which are going to be involved in several processes of this specific nature, which we refer to as catalysis. So kindly check our description boxes for various links of other videos. I've said that I'm going to be doing a second set of these specific, of course, roles in terms of a video, which is going to be assisting us cement on the knowledge which we're going to be obtaining, especially at looking at individual sets of these specific elements in terms of their various roles apart from what we have discussed. So that is it for now, guys. Bye, God bless you. Catch us in our next video.